The rest of the story. It was America, but in the days before there were states to be united, so it was the wrong place and the wrong time for Jean-Baptiste Dusable. He was a Frenchman, where and when being French was a punishable offense. He was a black man, where and when black men were in chains. He was a man in the middle, caught between conflicting prejudices. But most frustrating of all, Jean Dusable was a well-educated, highly intelligent, civilized man, alone in a world that had yet to be civilized. Jean Dusable was a child of the West Indies, born black in French Haiti. His father was a distinguished man, the owner of a prosperous coffee and hardwood plantation. His mother was killed in a Spanish raid when he, Jean, was 10. The boy was educated at the St. Thomas Catholic School, was afforded the advantages that one might imagine of a youngster from such a prestigious Haitian family. And then one day when Jean was 19, his father summoned him. The boy was a man now, and there was so much of the world yet to be seen. He, Jean, would begin that last most important part of his education by boarding his father's ship and setting sail for New France. New France, that meant New Orleans. And so on a spring morning, 1764, young Jean Dusable embarked upon the rest of his life. Figuratively and literally, it was to be anything but an easy voyage. A hurricane destroyed his father's vessel off the coast of Florida. Jean made it to shore. His money and his French citizenship papers did not. Arriving in New Orleans, he learned that black meant bondage. Of course, he was no runaway slave, but he couldn't prove that. He had no papers to verify his free status. So he sought refuge in a Catholic mission. He might have written his father for money, might even have returned home to Haiti, but his youthful pride prevented that. Instead, he would journey northward beyond this New France into British territory. And he did. And years passed. And yet, how might anyone have predicted the increasing tension between France and England? How could Jean have foreseen the day when he would be arrested and imprisoned by the British because he, Jean, was French? He was released after several months, and one can imagine the emotion of that occasion, the vows under the breath of this cultured man lost on an uncouth continent. To the British, he was French. To the French, he was black. And finally, ironically, almost humorously, to the Indians, he was white. One can imagine the emotion and ultimately the defiance of Jean Dusable. The brunt of kaleidoscopic prejudices, a man in the middle, determined single-handedly to civilize some corner of this dismal domain. And he did. And he did. As a trading post and a little 5-room house on the southwestern wilderness shores of Lake Michigan, a haven was hand-carved by a frustrated individualist named Jean-Baptiste Dusable, a refuge of his own creation from the tyrannies and the suspicion of smaller men. A simple, quiet retreat which he founded, a retreat which he alone founded, that ultimately became a community of individualists, grew into a town, flourished into a city called Chicago. And now you know the rest of the story.
Jean-Baptiste Dusable, a name often overlooked in mainstream history books, stands tall as the uncredited founder of one of America's greatest cities, Chicago. Born around 1745 in the French colony of Saint-Domingue, now Haiti, Dusable was of African and French descent, a free black man in a world gripped by colonialism and slavery. Despite the limitations of his time, he carved a life marked by resilience, entrepreneurship, and pioneering spirit. Dusable likely received a European-style education, which would later serve him well in his business dealings. He traveled to New Orleans and then north through the Mississippi River system, eventually settling in the Great Lakes region. By the 1770s, Dusable had established himself as a fur trader and entrepreneur, operating primarily in what is now Michigan. Around 1779, he settled at the mouth of the Chicago River, becoming the first permanent non-indigenous settler in the area. At a time when Chicago was nothing more than a swampy frontier, Dusable saw its potential. He built a prosperous homestead and trading post, complete with a large home, mill, bakery, and stables. His settlement became a vital hub for trade among Native American tribes, French traders, and American pioneers. DuSable was known for his diplomacy and his ability to navigate relationships with both indigenous peoples and European powers, including the British during their occupation of the region. DuSable's trading post was more than a business. It was the seed from which Chicago would grow. His settlement attracted others, laying the groundwork for the city's explosive development in the 19th century. Despite his monumental contributions, DuSable's name was largely left out of historical accounts for generations. It wasn't until the mid-20th century that historians began to recognize his role in Chicago's founding properly. In 1800, DuSable sold his property and moved to St. Charles, Missouri, where he lived out the remainder of his life. He died on August 28, 1818, largely forgotten by the city he helped establish. He was buried in an unmarked grave, a tragic irony for someone so pivotal in the making of an American metropolis. Today, Jean-Baptiste Pointe-du-Sable is finally receiving the recognition he deserves. Chicago has honored him with a museum, a high school, a park, and even a bridge bearing his name. His story is a testament to the overlooked contributions of Black Americans in the founding and building of the United States. More than just a founder, DuSable was a symbol of what it means to thrive against the odds. His legacy endures not only in the skyline of Chicago, but also in the spirit of determination, innovation, and community he embodied. His name may have once been hidden, but his impact can never be erased.